In the heart of London, just a stone's throw away from Buckingham Palace, Private James Harrington stood tall and proud. His scarlet tunic shimmered under the soft morning sunlight, and his towering bearskin hat made him look like a figure straight out of history books. Tourists from all over the world gathered around, snapping photos and whispering in awe at the sight of this real-life royal guard. Children pointed excitedly, while adults tried to capture the perfect shot for their social media feeds. James didn't move a muscle. His posture was as rigid as a statue, and his gaze remained fixed ahead, unwavering. James wasn't new to this role. He had spent years training to become one of the elite guards who protected the monarchy's most sacred traditions. Known among his peers for his discipline and calm demeanor, he carried himself with an air of quiet confidence that commanded respect. But what many didn't know about James was that he came from a mixed background. His father was British, and his mother hailed from Jamaica. Growing up, James had faced challenges because of his heritage, but those experiences only strengthened his resolve to prove himself through hard work and dedication. Today, standing here in uniform, he represented not just the crown but also every person who dared to rise above prejudice. Nearby, a man named Victor Langley walked his dog, a large German shepherd with piercing eyes and a muscular frame. Victor was different from the cheerful tourists around him. His face wore a permanent scowl, and his hands gripped the leash tightly as if holding onto something far heavier than just the dog. Victor wasn't happy about being near Buckingham Palace. To him, it was a symbol of privilege and authority. Two things he despised. As he passed by James, his frown deepened. Something about the guard's presence irritated him. Maybe it was the polished boots, or the way James seemed so composed, almost untouchable. Whatever it was, Victor couldn't shake off the growing resentment bubbling inside him. Victor stopped a few feet away from James, pretending to admire the palace gates, but secretly glaring at the guard. He muttered under his breath, criticizing people like him, who thought they were better than everyone else. The dog growled softly, sensing its master's tension. A couple walking by gave Victor a curious glance before hurrying along, sensing the negativity radiating from him. Despite the beautiful surroundings, the lush greenery of the park, the grandeur of the palace, and the lively chatter of visitors, Victor felt nothing but anger. And unfortunately for James, he was about to become the target of that anger. The atmosphere shifted subtly. While the tourists continued taking pictures and laughing, unaware of the brewing storm, James remained focused on his duty. Little did he know, this ordinary day was about to take an extraordinary turn. The calm before the storm was almost eerie, like the silence before lightning strikes. Every step Victor took closer to James brought them both closer to a confrontation neither could have anticipated. Victor's irritation grew with each passing second. He couldn't tear his eyes away from James, whose unwavering stance seemed to mock him. The guard didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't even seem to notice Victor standing there. To Victor, this was unbearable. How could someone like James, someone he believed didn't deserve respect, stand so proudly in front of everyone? It infuriated him. Clutching the leash tighter, Victor began muttering louder this time, no longer caring who heard him. "Look at you," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think wearing that fancy outfit makes you better than us?" A few nearby tourists turned their heads, sensing the hostility in Victor's tone. Some exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether they should intervene or stay out of it. One elderly woman clutched her purse closer, while a young couple quickly ushered their child away from the scene. But James remained still, as if carved from stone. His training had prepared him for moments like this, to ignore insults and provocations without breaking protocol. Yet inside, his heart raced. He could feel the weight of Victor's glare boring into him, and though he didn't show it, the tension was palpable. Victor wasn't satisfied with being ignored. If anything, James's silence only fueled his anger further. He stepped closer, his dog straining against the leash, its teeth bared in a low growl. "What's wrong?" Victor spat. "Too good to talk to me now? Or maybe you're scared?" His words were laced with venom, but James didn't respond. Instead, he focused on maintaining his composure, keeping his gaze steady and his posture rigid. This was his duty, and nothing, not even a man filled with hatred, would make him falter. But Victor wasn't done. His frustration boiled over into outright aggression. "Let's see how tough you really are," he snarled, unclipping the leash from his dog's collar. For a moment there was complete silence. Even the cheerful chatter of tourists seemed to fade into the background as all eyes turned to the German Shepherd. The massive dog stood frozen for a split second, its ears perked and muscles coiled like springs. Then, with a deafening bark, it lunged forward, charging straight toward James. The crowd gasped in shock. Parents pulled their children back, shielding them from what they feared might become a violent scene. Some people screamed, while others froze in place, too stunned to react. No one could believe what they were witnessing. A man deliberately setting his dog on a royal guard. It was surreal, almost cinematic, yet horrifyingly real. Everyone expected chaos to erupt. Surely James would defend himself, wouldn't he? Would he fight back? Or would he crumble under the sheer size and ferocity of the attacking animal? Yet, amidst the panic and confusion, James did neither. As the dog hurtled toward him, its sharp teeth gleaming in the sunlight, James dropped to one knee. In a calm, commanding voice that cut through the noise around him, he shouted, "Halt!" Time seemed to slow down. The dog skidded to an abrupt stop mere inches away from James, its claws scraping against the pavement. Its growls softened, replaced by an almost confused whimper. Then, to everyone's amazement, the German Shepherd sat obediently at James's feet, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. Victor stared in disbelief, his face turning red with rage and embarrassment. "No! Attack him!" he yelled, pointing furiously at James. But the dog didn't budge. It stayed where it was, completely ignoring its owner's commands. The contrast between the two men was striking. One consumed by fury and helplessness, the other radiating calmness and control. The crowd watched in stunned silence, unsure whether to cheer or remain quiet. What had just happened? How had James managed to command such authority over a dog that moments ago had been ready to pounce? As Victor continued shouting futile orders, the murmurs among the onlookers grew louder. People began recording videos, capturing every detail of the unfolding drama. Some whispered about calling the police, while others simply marveled at James's incredible poise. Whatever came next, it was clear that this encounter would not end quietly. As the German Shepherd sat obediently at James's feet, a strange calm settled over the scene, but only for a moment. Victor, now red-faced and seething with humiliation, couldn't comprehend what had just happened. His dog, trained to respond to his commands, had completely disregarded him in favor of obeying a stranger. To Victor, this felt like a personal betrayal, a direct challenge to his authority. "What did you do to my dog?" he barked, his voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "This isn't over." James didn't respond immediately. Still kneeling, on one knee he gently patted the dog's head, ensuring it remained calm. His movements were deliberate, measured, and full of confidence. The crowd watched intently, their eyes darting between Victor's enraged face and James's composed demeanor. It was as if two worlds were colliding, one driven by chaos and hatred, the other anchored in discipline and control. Victor took a step forward, pointing an accusatory finger at James. "You think you're so clever, don't you? You tricked him somehow," he shouted, trying desperately to regain some semblance of power. But his words fell flat. Even the tourists who had been hesitant to intervene earlier began exchanging skeptical looks. No one believed James had done anything underhanded. Instead, they admired how he handled the situation without losing his cool. James finally rose, to his feet, standing tall once again. His posture exuded strength, but there was no arrogance in his expression, only quiet resolve. He locked eyes with Victor, not out of aggression, but to convey a simple truth, that his actions spoke louder than any insult or slur. The contrast between the two men was stark. Where Victor's emotions spiraled out of control, James remained steady, like a rock amidst crashing waves. The murmurs among the crowd grew louder, and someone nearby exclaimed, "Did you see that? That guy just tried to sick his dog on the guard." Another person chimed in. And the dog listened to the guard instead, can you believe it? Phones were held high, capturing every second of the confrontation. Some people even live-streamed the incident, drawing comments from viewers around the world who praised James's composure and condemned Victor's behavior. Victor noticed the growing attention and shifted uncomfortably. For a man fueled by prejudice and resentment, being the center of negative scrutiny was unbearable. Yet his pride wouldn't let him back down. "You think you've won?" he snapped, his voice cracking slightly. "You haven't seen the last of me." His threat sounded hollow, though, especially when juxtaposed against James's unwavering presence. Meanwhile, the German shepherd stayed firmly planted at James's side, gazing up at him with loyalty that seemed almost unnatural given the circumstances. People whispered about how remarkable it was that such a large, intimidating animal responded so readily to someone it had never met before. Some speculated that James must have had experience with dogs, perhaps during his training or in his personal life. Others simply credited his commanding tone and body language, which left no room for doubt or hesitation. Despite the rising tension, James refused to engage further. His job wasn't to argue or retaliate. It was to maintain order and represent the values of the institution he served. Every fiber of his being was focused on fulfilling that duty, regardless of the provocation. And while Victor fumed, pacing back and forth like a caged animal, James stood firm, embodying the very essence of professionalism. In that moment, something profound became clear to everyone watching. This wasn't just about a man and his dog. It was about respect versus disrespect, control versus chaos, and dignity versus disgrace. As the seconds ticked by, the crowd's sympathies leaned heavily in James's favor. They saw not just a royal guard, but a symbol of resilience, a man who faced hatred with grace and emerged stronger because of it. But the situation was far from resolved. With Victor's temper reaching new heights and the crowd growing restless, it was only a matter of time before things escalated further. Would reason prevail, or would Victor's rage push the encounter into dangerous territory? All eyes remained fixed on the unfolding drama, waiting to see what would happen next. Victor's frustration reached a boiling point. The combination of his dog's disobedience, the crowd's growing disapproval, and James's unshakable composure left him feeling utterly powerless. His face was flushed, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He couldn't understand why everything had gone so wrong, why his plan to humiliate James had backfired in such a public and humiliating way. To him, it felt like the entire world was laughing at him, even though no one had dared to say a word. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" Victor snarled, taking another step closer to James. His voice was louder now, almost frantic, as if he believed shouting would somehow restore his dominance over the situation. "You're nothing but a glorified statue in a silly hat." But his words sounded hollow even to himself. James didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't give Victor the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, he stood tall, his gaze steady, exuding a quiet strength that only seemed to enrage Victor further. The tension in the air was palpable. Some tourists edged backward, fearing that Victor might lash out physically. Others stayed rooted in place, their phones recording every second of the escalating confrontation. Among the murmurs of the crowd, someone whispered, "This isn't going to end well." Another person muttered, "Someone needs to call the police before this gets out of hand." Despite the unease spreading through the park, no one stepped forward to intervene directly. Everyone seemed frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Victor, desperate to regain control, began pacing back and forth in front of James. Each step he took radiated agitation, his movements jerky and erratic. "You won't get away with this," he spat, pointing a finger at James. "I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." It was an empty threat, but it revealed the depth of Victor's anger and insecurity. He wasn't just upset about the dog. He was lashing out because he felt exposed, vulnerable, and defeated in front of a sea of strangers. As Victor ranted, James remained motionless, his expression unreadable. Inside, however, his mind was working quickly. He knew that situations like this could spiral out of control if not handled carefully. While his training taught him to stay calm under pressure, it also emphasized the importance of de-escalation whenever possible. Yet, he also understood that some people, like Victor, were too consumed by their emotions to listen to reason. All James could do was maintain his position and hope that help arrived soon. Help did arrive, though not a moment too soon. Two police officers patrolling nearby noticed the commotion and hurried over to investigate. Their uniforms commanded immediate attention, and the crowd parted to let them through. One officer approached Victor, who was still shouting accusations at James while the other scanned the scene, assessing the situation. "What's going on here?" the first officer asked firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Victor immediately launched into an explanation, his voice rising with each word. "This man, he did something to my dog. He tricked it or hypnotized it or something. Look at it sitting there like it belongs to him." He gestured wildly toward the German shepherd, which remained calmly at James's side. The absurdity of his claims was evident to everyone, including the officers, but they listened patiently, jotting down notes as Victor rambled. Meanwhile, witnesses began speaking up. A young woman stepped forward, holding her phone. "Officer, I recorded everything," she said confidently. "This man deliberately set his dog on the guard. You can see it all right here." She played the video, showing Victor unleashing the dog and yelling commands that went ignored. Other bystanders chimed in, corroborating her account. "He was using racial slurs too," one man added, shaking his head in disgust. It was awful. The second officer turned to James, who finally broke his silence. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked. James nodded once, his voice calm but firm. "I'm fine, thank you. I followed protocol and ensured the safety of myself and others." The simplicity of his response spoke volumes, reinforcing the professionalism he had displayed throughout the ordeal. As the officers gathered more information, Victor's bravado began to crumble. Realizing he was outnumbered, not just by law enforcement but by public opinion, he started to shrink into himself. For the first time since the incident began, he looked uncertain, even scared. The tables had turned completely, and now, instead of being the aggressor, Victor found himself cornered by his own actions. The crowd watched silently as the officers prepared to escort Victor away. Some clapped softly, while others simply breathed sighs of relief. Though the confrontation was far from pleasant, it served as a powerful reminder of the importance of respect, discipline, and accountability. And standing amidst it all, James remained a pillar of strength, a testament to the power of composure in the face of chaos. The police officers wasted no time in taking control of the situation. One of them firmly placed a hand on Victor's shoulder, guiding him away from James and the crowd. "Sir, we need you to come with us," the officer said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Victor hesitated, glancing back at his dog, which was still sitting obediently beside James. For a moment it looked like he might resist, but the weight of the situation and the growing number of people watching made him think twice. With a defeated sigh, he allowed himself to be led toward the patrol car parked nearby. As they walked, the second officer approached James, speaking in a respectful and reassuring voice. "Private Harrington, I want to thank you for handling this so professionally," he said. "Your actions likely prevented a much more serious incident." James nodded slightly, his expression remaining calm and composed. "It's my duty to maintain order, sir," he replied simply. The officer smiled faintly before turning to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, please give us some space. We'll handle this from here." Meanwhile, Victor sat slumped in the back seat of the police car, staring out the window with a mixture of anger and shame. His mind raced as he replayed the events in his head. He couldn't understand how everything had gone so wrong. How had his dog turned against him? Why hadn't James reacted the way he expected? And why did everyone seem to side with the guard instead of him? Each question gnawed at him, feeding into his growing sense of humiliation. At the station, things only got worse for Victor. The officers reviewed the video footage provided by witnesses, along with statements from several tourists who had seen the entire confrontation unfold. The evidence painted a damning picture. Victor had deliberately set his dog on James, used racial slurs, and refused to de-escalate despite multiple opportunities. When confronted with the recordings, Victor tried to downplay his behavior, claiming he had been joking or that the insults were taken out of context. But the videos told a different story, one that left little room for doubt. During questioning, one of the officers leaned forward, his arms crossed on the table. "Mr. Langley, let me ask you something," he began, his voice firm but not unkind. "Do you know why dogs respond better to certain people than others?" Victor shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Because they can sense confidence and control," the officer continued. "They don't care about uniforms or titles, they care about how someone carries themselves. That's why your dog listened to Private Harrington instead of you. It wasn't because of any trickery. It was because he showed leadership when you didn't." Victor opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. Deep down he knew the officer was right. His own insecurities and rage had clouded his judgment, making him reckless and irrational. For the first time, he began to see how his actions had spiraled out of control, and how they reflected poorly on him, not on James. Back at the park, life slowly returned to normal. The crowd dispersed, though conversations about the incident lingered. Many praised James for his composure and professionalism, while others expressed relief that the situation hadn't escalated further. Someone even went up to James and shook his hand, thanking him for setting an example of grace under pressure. James accepted the gesture humbly, reminding everyone that he was simply doing his job. Later that evening, news outlets picked up the story, sharing videos and eyewitness accounts online. Social media buzzed with reactions, ranging from admiration for James to outrage over Victor's behavior. Some commenters highlighted the broader message of the incident, that respect and dignity always triumph over hatred and aggression. Others pointed out the irony of Victor's actions, how his attempt to assert dominance had only exposed his weaknesses. For James, the day ended quietly. After filing a report with the authorities, he returned to his post, resuming his duties as if nothing had happened. To him, the incident was just another challenge he had faced and overcome, a testament to the values he held dear. But for Victor, the consequences were far from over. Facing charges of harassment and inciting violence, he would soon have to confront the full weight of his actions and perhaps begin the long journey toward understanding and change. Victor's days in court were long and grueling, each one chipping away at his pride. The charges against him, harassment, inciting violence, and public disturbance, carried significant weight, especially given the overwhelming evidence. Video footage from multiple angles, witness testimonies, and even expert opinions about dog behavior all pointed to the same conclusion. Victor had acted out of malice and prejudice. His attempts to justify his actions as a misunderstanding or a joke gone wrong fell flat, leaving him with few options but to accept responsibility. The judge handed down a sentence that included community service, mandatory anger, management classes, and a hefty fine. But perhaps the harshest punishment was the public shame that followed him everywhere. News of the incident spread far beyond London, turning Victor into a cautionary tale. Friends distanced themselves, colleagues whispered behind his back, and neighbors avoided eye contact when passing him on the street. For a man who once prided himself on his self-image, this isolation was unbearable. As part of his community service, Victor was assigned to work at a local animal shelter, a twist of fate that seemed almost poetic. At first, he resented the assignment, viewing it as yet another humiliation. The smell of disinfectant, the constant barking, and the endless chores felt like punishments designed to break his spirit. But over time, something unexpected happened. Victor began to change. Working closely with animals forced Victor to confront aspects of himself he had long ignored. Dogs, unlike people, didn't care about appearances or excuses. They responded only to authenticity. If Victor approached them with anger or impatience, they shied away. But when he showed kindness and patience, they wagged their tails and leaned into his touch. Slowly, Victor realized that the same principles applied to human interactions. Respect couldn't be demanded. It had to be earned. One day, While cleaning kennels, Victor struck up a conversation with Sarah, one of the shelter volunteers. She was warm and non-judgmental, treating him with a kindness he hadn't experienced in months. Over time, their conversations deepened, and Sarah shared stories about her own struggles with prejudice and forgiveness. Her words resonated with Victor, planting seeds of reflection in his mind. For the first time, he began to see how his biases and insecurities had shaped his worldview, and how destructive they had been. Months passed, and Victor's transformation became evident to those around him. He started speaking softly, listening more and thinking before reacting. The staff at the shelter noticed the shift and praised his efforts, encouraging him to keep going. Even the dogs seemed to respond differently, trusting him in ways they hadn't before. It was during one of these moments, playing fetch with a scruffy terrier, that Victor had an epiphany. True strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about understanding them. Determined to make amends, Victor decided to revisit the park where everything had gone wrong. He wasn't sure what he hoped to achieve, but he knew he needed closure. As fate would have it, James was there, not in uniform this time, but dressed casually as he browsed through the shelter's adoption event. Victor froze, unsure whether to approach him or turn back. Summoning every ounce of courage, he walked up to James, his heart pounding. "I owe you an apology," Victor said, his voice trembling. "What I did was wrong, and I regret it deeply. You handled yourself with dignity, and I acted like a fool." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "I'm trying to do better, but I know saying sorry isn't enough. I just wanted you to know that I mean it." James studied Victor for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, he extended his hand. "Apologies aren't easy," he said. "But taking responsibility is the first step toward change. I hope you continue growing." Their handshake was brief but meaningful, symbolizing not just forgiveness, but the possibility of redemption. For Victor, that moment marked a new beginning. He left the park feeling lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, he now had a clearer sense of purpose. To challenge his own prejudices and strive to become someone worthy of respect, not because of titles or authority, but because of his actions. And for James, the encounter served as a reminder that even those consumed by hatred could find their way back to humanity, one small step at a time. Years passed, and the story of James Harrington and Victor Langley became a quiet legend, shared in whispered conversations and reflective moments. For James, life continued much as it always had, disciplined, purposeful, and dedicated to service. He rose through the ranks of the regiment, earning respect not just for his actions on that fateful day, but for the consistent example he set every day thereafter. His name was often mentioned during training sessions for new recruits, held up as proof that true strength lies not in physical power or aggression, but in restraint, empathy, and leadership. But what made James's story so enduring wasn't just his own character. It was how it inspired others. People who had witnessed the incident firsthand still spoke about it years later, recounting how they felt when they saw James stand tall against hatred without losing his composure. "It reminded me," one woman said during an interview for a documentary, "that no matter how ugly things get, there's always a way to respond with dignity." Another man, who had been visiting London from abroad at the time, claimed the encounter changed how he dealt with conflict in his own life. "I used to react with anger whenever someone provoked me," he admitted. "But after seeing Private Harrington handle that situation, I realized there's power in staying calm." For Victor, the journey was far more challenging, and far less glamorous. After completing his community service and attending months of counseling, he emerged a different person. The once angry man who had lashed out at the world now approached life with a cautious humility. Working at the animal shelter had taught him patience and responsibility, while his conversations with Sarah and other volunteers opened his eyes to perspectives he'd never considered before. Slowly but surely, Victor began shedding the prejudices that had clouded his judgment for so long. One of the most significant changes came when Victor adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy mixed breed named Max, from the shelter where he volunteered. At first he worried he wouldn't know how to care for it properly, but the staff assured him that love and consistency were all any dog needed. Caring for Max gave Victor a renewed sense of purpose. Every morning, as he walked Max through the park, he found himself reflecting on how far he'd come since that day years ago. Sometimes he even imagined bumping into James again, wondering if the guard would recognize him or care. As fate would have it, their paths crossed once more, not dramatically, but quietly. One sunny afternoon, while browsing through stalls at a local charity fair, Victor spotted James standing near a booth promoting pet adoption. This time James wasn't in uniform. He wore jeans and a simple jacket, laughing warmly as he played tug-of-war with a playful golden retriever. Victor hesitated, unsure whether to approach him, but something compelled him to take the chance. "Private Harrington?" Victor called softly, stepping closer. James looked up, recognition flickering across his face. "Mr. Langley," he replied, his tone neutral but polite. There was no animosity, no lingering resentment, just a calm acknowledgement of the past. Encouraged by this, Victor continued, "I wanted to thank you for everything. That day, it changed my life. I'm not proud of what I did, but because of it, I've tried to be better, to do better." James listened intently, nodding slightly. When Victor finished speaking, James offered a small smile. "Change isn't easy," he said, "but the fact that you're here, saying these words, it shows you've grown. And that's something worth celebrating." They parted ways soon after, exchanging nothing more than a handshake and a few kind words. Yet for both men, the brief reunion carried profound meaning. In the years that followed, Victor threw himself into advocacy work, using his experiences to promote tolerance and understanding. He visited schools and community centers, sharing his story openly, not to seek pity but to encourage others to confront their biases and strive for growth. Meanwhile, James remained steadfast in his role as a symbol of resilience and professionalism, inspiring countless individuals with his quiet strength. Though their lives took different paths, the two men shared a legacy, one of redemption, forgiveness, and the belief that even the darkest moments can lead to brighter futures. Their story served as a powerful reminder that humanity is capable of change, and that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can leave the deepest impact. The legacy of James Harrington and Victor Langley grew far beyond the boundaries of that London park where their paths first crossed. What had started as a single moment of conflict became a story told around dinner tables, classrooms, and community gatherings, a tale of resilience, redemption, and the power of choosing dignity over hatred. People marveled at how two men from vastly different worlds had come together under such extraordinary circumstances, leaving an indelible mark on everyone who heard about it. For James, the incident solidified his reputation, not just within the regiment but across society. He was invited to speak at events honoring courage and leadership, though he always downplayed his role. "I didn't do anything special," he would say humbly. "I simply did what I was trained to do, stay calm and uphold my duty." Yet those who listened closely understood that his actions went far beyond training. It wasn't just discipline that made him stand out. It was his unwavering belief in respect, even for someone who showed him none. Young recruits entering the military often cited James as their inspiration, striving to emulate his composure and integrity. James's influence extended beyond formal settings. Social media posts, articles, and documentaries continued to highlight his story, inspiring countless individuals worldwide. One viral post titled, "The Guard Who Stood Tall Against Hate," garnered millions of views, with comments pouring in, from people sharing how James's example helped them navigate difficult situations in their own lives. A teenager wrote, "Your story taught me that staying calm doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're strong enough to rise above." Another reader confessed, "After reading this, I forgave someone who hurt me badly. Thank you for showing me there's another way." Victor's transformation, too, left a lasting impression. His journey from anger and prejudice to humility and advocacy resonated deeply with audiences. Speaking engagements became a regular part of his life, though they weren't always easy. Standing before crowds, recounting his mistakes and the harm he caused required immense vulnerability. But Victor embraced it, knowing his honesty could help others avoid similar pitfalls. "I used to think I was better than everyone else," he admitted during one talk. But the truth is, we're all capable of making bad choices, and we're all capable of changing. His work with animals remained central to his new identity. Alongside Max, his loyal rescue dog, Victor traveled to shelters and schools, teaching children about compassion and responsibility. Together, they demonstrated the bond between humans and animals, emphasizing trust and kindness. The sight of Victor smiling as Max performed tricks never failed to warm hearts, serving as a testament to the healing power of second chances for both man and beast. Though their lives took separate directions, James and Victor occasionally crossed paths again. Each meeting was brief but meaningful, filled with mutual respect and quiet understanding. Once, during a charity gala supporting veterans and animal welfare, they found themselves seated at the same table. Over dinner, they exchanged stories about their respective journeys. Victor spoke openly about the challenges he faced while rebuilding his life, while James shared anecdotes about mentoring young soldiers. By the end of the evening, they parted ways with a firm handshake, each grateful for the other's role in shaping their futures. Decades later, when asked to reflect on the impact of that day, both men agreed on one thing: it wasn't just about them. Their story belonged to everyone who had witnessed it, drawn strength from it, or been inspired by it. It reminded people that humanity thrives when we choose empathy over judgment, forgiveness over resentment, and growth over stagnation. Whether through James's steadfastness or Victor's redemption, the message was clear. No matter how broken someone may seem, change is always possible. And so, the tale of the Royal Guard and the man who once set his dog loose in hatred evolved into a timeless lesson about the triumph of character over chaos. It proved that even in moments of tension and turmoil, acts of grace can shine brightly, illuminating the path toward unity and hope. For James and Victor alike, the legacy of that day wasn't just personal, it was universal, a beacon guiding others toward a brighter, kinder world.